UFOs have been with us probably ever since man and woman were kicked out of the Garden of Eden for their sin. When I was a kid, I had two different sightings, and they were defining moments for me. They scared me, and they fascinated me at the same time, and they still do. I was given a set of New World book encyclopedias of knowledge from 1954. There's a short and somewhat simplistic feature about UFOs, and it's kind of interesting to take a look at what was thought of them at that particular time, early on in the historic period sightings. Roswell had not been real long before this, and neither was the Kenneth Arnold sightings. So anyways, I thought I would share the brief article with you. So, I quote, "On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a businessman of Boise, Idaho, was flying his private plane across the Cascade Mountains. Suddenly, he sighted some strange objects in the sky ahead of him. In his own words, he said, I could see their outline quite plainly against the snow as they approached the mountain. They flew very close to the mountain tops and directly south to southeast down a hog's back ridge of the range, flying like geese. I watched for about 3 minutes, a chain of saucer-like things at least 5 miles long, swerving in and out of the high mountain peaks. They were flat like a pie pan, and so shiny that they reflected the sun like a mirror." End quote. The newspaper picked up the story and dubbed the strange objects flying saucers and set off a furor. As was to be expected, people all over the country began to see flying saucers. If a man climbs to the top of a flagpole in Atlantic City to see how long he can stay there, others will climb poles in a dozen other cities to do the same thing. If some Harvard students try to break into a Radcliffe dormitory, students in scores of co-ed colleges will stage panty raids. People began to see flying flapjacks, legless crabs, flying washtubs. They were round like a teardrop, a ball flat on top and bottom, or like an ice cream cone with red on top. Some were brilliantly lighted, some dull. Some showed light, some light, and some forms of portholes. Others spouted flames or had tails of smoke and flame. The speed of the objects ranged from dead stop hovering to 1,500 miles per hour. Within 2 months, flying saucers has been reported from every state of the Union, the District of Columbia, Canada, and Mexico. They had spread outside the Western Hemisphere too, from Hong Kong to London, and South Africa to Scandinavia. A number of large reports were of course quickly exposed as hoaxes perpetuated by persons seeking publicity, but not a few reports came from persons regarded as above suspicion: airline pilots, police and military officers, Weather Bureau employees, and scientists in various fields. Popular speculation quickly leaped to the conclusion that the Earth was being visited by spaceships from Mars and other foreign parts. Then a more sober theory arose of such serious import as eventually to compel government action. The Cold War between Soviet Russia and the Western powers was at its height. Had Russia developed some new secret weapon in the form of spinning discs able to travel at enormous speeds? In December 1947, the U.S. Air Force began an official inquiry into the reports of flying saucers. This was, of course, nicknamed Project Saucer. In the spring of 1950, President Truman felt compelled to answer persistent questions that were being raised. The flying saucers were not, he said in a formal statement, connected with any secret project or secret weapon of the United States government. The Air Force investigators made the report 2 years later. In December 1949, they had looked into 375 eyewitness accounts of flying saucers, and some turned out to be hoaxes, others were undoubtedly hallucinations. The majority were explained as mistakes of identifying normal objects and normal phenomena. A residue of cases remained, however, unexplained. The conclusion was that Project Saucer had found not one authenticated case of an extraterrestrial visitor or a secret weapon of a foreign power. The objects most frequently mistaken for flying saucers were weather balloons and the planet Venus. The U.S. Navy disclosed at this time that it had been sending out very large radiosondes, weather balloons up to 100 feet in diameter. From Arizona and New Mexico had come a number of reports of green fireballs. They had been seen by several astronomers and other scientists. These were explained as meteors, seeming to be slow in flight because of great distance away, but visible through the clear air of this arid region. The green color, said Professor Fred L. Whipple of Harvard, was probably due to magnesium. Many of the accounts were of the Lubbock Lights, so-called after Lubbock, Texas. These were circular or ellipses or irregular trails of light, often in clusters, usually seen on low-lying clouds. In some instances, the lights moved across the sky at incredible velocities. Whatever else might be attributed to fraud, hallucination, mass hysteria, and the like, the Lubbock Lights could not. Clear photographs of these lights were obtained in Texas, Arizona, and Massachusetts. Dr. Donald H. Menzel asserted that the Lubbock Lights were mirages, and he reproduced many of their characteristic appearances in the laboratory. Mirages occur commonly in a region of temperature inversion where warm layers of air overlay colder layers near the ground. Light rays extending from a mountaintop, ship, building, etc., toward the bottom of the horizon are reflected or refracted downwards by the air layers and come to Earth beyond the horizontal zone. An observer at that point will seem to see the object in the sky, whereas in fact it is out of his direct sight below the horizon. The dry, clear air of the southwestern United States is ideal for the production of mirages. A significant fact is that the Lubbock Lights were seen mostly in this region and in similar areas elsewhere. They were notably absent from large cities and other areas where seeing is curtailed by smoke and etc. Dr. Menzel concluded that the Lubbock Lights were mirages, reflections of ground lights, and in some instances of balloons and airplanes in the sky. Their movement and great velocity is a necessary consequence of this theory. Shine a flashlight so as to strike a mirror at a small angle, and you can observe how a small motion of light becomes a large displacement of the reflected ray. The question was promptly asked, if the Lubbock Lights are mirages, why weren't flying saucers seen before 1947? And of course they had an answer for this. They were seen. They have been seen for centuries. There have been flying saucer scares since ancient times. They flare up when some particularly spectacular display is seen, and when the newspapers and magazines play up the story. All that was new in 1947 was the name flying saucer. Readers of the books of Charles Forte will find under the head of Lights in the Sky a compilation of such accounts going back to the first newspapers. Even though Sirius spaceships is old stuff, several of the flying saucer accounts told of a dark shape like a dirigible balloon, marked by a line of lighted portholes zooming swiftly across the sky. In 1897, it was, according to newspaper stories, a cigar-shaped airship on which the men were clearly visible. And that's where the account stops. Doesn't give much of an explanation to the inquiring mind. Of course, we are in 2017, and we know there's a little more to the enigma than just being mirages. I myself have come to the conclusion that they are at least in part demonic spiritual activity in the end times, and certainly that activity has increased the closer we get to Christ's return. So anyways, I'm going to stop at that. Thank you for stopping by and taking a listen. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope maybe you got a good laugh out of it, because it was so simplistic in nature at a very early time in modern ufology. God bless, and have a great day.